Hello again, people of the internet. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the WTF Plate Carrier 13. So, a lot of you guys are probably already familiar with this because it's like the $99 wonder carrier. So today we're going to overlook this real quick and see how wonderful it really is. As usual, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the front end. Well, actually, I'll get started with the cummerbund since I got to take that off anyway. The cummerbund is an elastic cummerbund, like many other types of this sort of cummerbund. It's got a front, it's got a rear. Well, actually, in the case of the Plate Carrier 13 that WTF makes, the kind of unique and interesting thing about this is that it's basically two of the exact same of everything, just paired together. So while the front and rear plate bags are essentially the same exact thing, just with the Velcro on the shoulders reversed, the cummerbund is also just two of the exact same thing, and you put it on whichever direction you want to put it on. Velcro is Velcro. The elastic is nice and thick and very stiff. Maybe a little too stiff, but it is definitely stiff enough for a good bit of longevity. The standard medium-sized cummerbund is 3 cells wide, which I think is great, especially if you're a smaller framed person. You already know that you've got about 6 to 7 spaces of molly columns on each side to work with, and 3 cells is approximately 3 M4 magazines wide, which is about 6, maybe 6.5. So, especially for smaller frame people, this is an excellent size cummerbund. If you're a plump lad, maybe not so much. But that's what they make different sizes for. Alright, anyways. The bottom webbing is double stitched in. That's fine. The back end where it attaches to the Velcro and binds together with the elastic is also double stitched. Everything else is single stitched, including the dividing sewing, which I can't say I'm in love with. I've got another carrier that we'll be going over later on from an overseas company, and that overseas company is the only company I've ever seen, aside from WTF, that has only single-stitched their elastic cummerbunds. It is double-stitched at the top and the bottom, so I'm assuming that will help a little bit with the stretching durability here, but I guess only time will tell how long this will hold up for, considering, like I said, I've never seen anyone, aside from WTF and a couple other companies, only single stitch the center. So that's interesting. Other than that, cummerbund, it's good to go. Does what it's supposed to do. Alright, sure, I'll start with the front. The front straps have soft Velcro on both sides, so that way they not only mate with the top rear plate bag straps, but can also mate up with any shoulder pads that might have Velcro in them to keep them in place. Although I've had a number of shoulder pads from everyone from First Spirit SKD to any major shoulder brand pad I've had. And I've never seen much of a difference in them staying put on your shoulders, whether or not they had Velcro on them. So I guess it's a preference thing. Some people like it, some people don't care. But anyways, most of these carriers seem to, well, I won't say most, but a lot of these carriers seem to have compatibility with that. I will say this too. When wearing this carrier without any shoulder pads, this bit of soft loop Velcro actually does kind of help it to be a little bit more comfortable. It does give you a little bit of, maybe not so much padding, but how should I put it, like, squishiness. There you go. There's your scientific term for the day, squishiness. It does seem to help it ride on your shoulders a little bit without the webbing digging into it. Which is a good thing, I think, because the webbing that they use on here is pretty rough, coarse webbing. So regardless of whether or not you feel you need shoulder pads to interface with Velcro so it holds in place, it's a good idea because of how stiff and coarse the webbing is that they use for shoulder pads. All right, the front here, there's no pocket and a basic, 3 by whatever piece of Velcro on the front. So I guess you can add a patch. I griped about this a little bit previously with another carrier, and that is I don't feel that carriers these days that only have Velcro on the front without either webbing sewn either under it or a laser cut piece of material here with Velcro on top of it to account for the growing popularity of both end-user devices, people using their cell phones as video cameras at the range, or just to add one of the increasingly common small GP pouches up front there. I kind of feel like only having Velcro up front is kind of an outdated thing. And once again, one of those things that really wouldn't take much more time or effort or cost to update to current standards. The front buckles are front buckles. I can't remember if they are. They are split buckles, so that you can remove them if needed. So you can run this completely slick up the front. They're attached by basically sewing them in with the Velcro. I can't remember if they're sewn more than that. Hold up one second. Your expert YouTuber reviewer will now do things, yeah. So they are not. The buckles are just sewn in, single stitched with the rest of the Velcro up top here. They are kind of double stitched at the bottom here at each side, but they're not, bar tacked on like most plate carriers that use, the webbing sewn on for the Swift clip buckles would be. How much of a durability issue that could be going forward, I don't know. I mean, a placard probably weighs what, at maximum 7 pounds, maybe 8. So I doubt that's too much for the buckles being simply sewn in here to handle. How that's going to fare durability-wise in the future with people constantly pulling on it, tugging on it, and constantly attaching and detaching things from it, I don't know. I feel like they should have bar tacked it on here because other companies have gone through the trouble of bar tacking even simpler and less needful things to be bar tacked in place. Yeah, so there you go, my first gripe with this carrier. On the bottom, it's a piece of loop Velcro. Thankfully, they did one single piece of loop Velcro, and it's also stitched down the middle. That's all good. You're going to hear me say this over and over again, but as with most things on this carrier, this is also single stitched on. For the main piece of Velcro that's going to consistently have stuff being yanked on and off of it, I would have much preferred if they'd at least double stitched around the edges. Again, whether that matters to you or not, I don't know, but my personal preference, being the main piece of Velcro, it kind of should have been double stitched. The same way these should have been, bar tacked or similar in place. So yeah, which is, well, I guess while I'm griping about the sewing, we'll get to the shoulder straps. So the shoulder straps are in much the same way as a lot of these carriers, kind of like single and a half stitched on. when we get to the inside of the plate bag, we'll go into this a little bit more. It's single and a half stitched on the outside, which what I mean by that is it's single stitched, but tacked on the ends because obviously the thread needs to tuck in somewhere so it doesn't just pull out. So it is single stitched, but kind of an extra half because the tack at the ends that holds the thread in does kind of go, partially or most of the way across the shoulder straps. We'll get to this later, but on the inside, there is also another stitch on the inside when it was sewn in on the reverse. So theoretically, it technically, like the Slickster carrier before it, it technically is double stitched in place. So I don't think the shoulder straps are going to just pull out, because there's only a single stitch of stitching here. It technically is double stitched, even though it's two separate, two separate occasions of stitching that equate to double stitch. But like I was saying on a previous discussion about this, given the amount of weight that's likely to be on a carrier like this, I think it'll be okay. I can't say I'm a fan. My personal preference would have been for it to be bar tacked, but I think it'll be all right. In the same way that I think that even though I would have preferred these to be bar tacked in place, having them simply double stitched here, I will probably be okay. I think that's kind of this is a $99 carrier, so you gotta cut some corners in production time somewhere. And apparently the sewing is one of the places they decide to cut the corners. So is in very much like the sort of theme of this carrier you're going to see me go into. It's all very much kind of like good enough. There's nothing, I will say right up front, there's nothing about the sewing on this carrier that I'd say is bad. It's all nicely done, it's straight, it's, tight. There's nothing bad about it. But was the extra mile gone to? No, of course not. Because it's a $99 carrier. So take that into advisement when I'm bitching about some of the less awesome areas, that this is about as cheap as it gets for a plate carrier. That's any level of quality. Alright, so getting to the reverse of it. The reverse is actually my biggest gripe about the carrier as a whole. And that is they put this extra piece of some kind of tweedish, stretchy stuff here, even though it really isn't all that stretchy. It's actually kind of stiff. That may be because this is still relatively new. It may be because it's just not super stretchy. Anyways, they put this in the middle. I don't really know why they did this. So, how do I explain that? It's one of those things where it's a feature, but I don't feel like it's really a needed feature. As we go in here, let's talk first about the interior of the carrier. So you have this bottom flap. This bottom flap, which is a ridiculously long, massive bottom flap, the longest bottom flap I've ever seen on a plate carrier. If you fold it up completely with no plates in here, it goes up like literally over half of the carrier, which means there is an absolutely huge range of thickness that this could potentially account for. It's got a solid, probably 4-inch by 1.5 inches of Velcro strips to secure it, and that is matched on the interior of the plate bag by the same length of loop strips. So when this thing is in here with normal size plates, it engages most of this on both sides, and it's not going anywhere. Like I've tried giving it a good yank or jolting it up and down, and it's pretty solid. It's not coming out. The other unique thing about this plate bag is that you don't have to worry about seams on the side of each part of the plate bag, because this is actually appears to be like one whole piece of cordura folded over, with this then seamed in the middle. So there is no traditional seam on the outside of it, which I thought was a pretty clever idea for a carrier that they're going light on the stitching on. It's a pretty great way to avoid that potentially getting, stressed or busted under stress, especially if you're going to put thicker plates in here. That was a clever move on their part. As far as the center part goes, speaking of plate thickness, they put this tweevish stuff on the middle, which kind of stretches a little bit. However, so as I mentioned before, the plates I'm using are just Hesco 3810s, which are, not the thickest plates, not the thinnest plates. They're kind of in the middle, and they're a standard sappy cut, so 12.5, and they fit perfectly. But when those plates are in here, and given that they're curved and everything, it actually fills this out pretty good. And when this is in here, this tweave material, it's kind of how do I put this? I feel like it isn't quite as flexible of a design as they think it is, because this whole carrier is actually already pretty, with even just 3810s in it, it's pretty stretched out. It could fit thicker plates, but that'll be kind of stretching it a bit more, and I'm not sure that's really ideal. When the flap's in here, it's actually stretched, enough where it's not actually like, resting on the middle of the curvature. It's pulled flat, across it. Like if I was to close the flap, given that there's a channel in the middle, I could, stick my hand up underneath the flap, underneath the space in the middle here, because it's already pulled, pretty tight. So it can take larger plates, but not that much larger, in my opinion. Of course, I haven't seen anyone actually try to stuff this thing to the max, but I would say anything more than like, let's say like a 1.1 inch plate, like a Hesco 3611C, would be probably about as much as it could reasonably stretch to fit. So even though this does have a ridiculously long bottom flap that could account for, a plate as thick as, about, what's that, like 2 inches? I don't feel like the actual plate pack itself can really stretch that big, even with the tweave part in the middle. Your mileage may vary. That's my opinion. Unfortunately, I don't have like 3 plates to try to stack in here at the same time, so there's that. But anyways, my biggest gripe though with this is the simple fact that I'm gonna go ahead and yank this inside out real quick so you can see this. All right. Now, at the top here, where the plate bag pieces of Cordura are joined, it is once again single stitched. Is it going to be a problem at the top? I don't know. Would have been nice for them to double stitch it, but again, as long as you don't stuff this thing too full where it's straining at the seams, it'll probably be all right. Even though, because the top of a carrier is a pretty low stress area, so I think it'll be okay, but it still annoys me that they didn't only single stitch it. However, my big gripe with this is the way that they've sewn this tweave center part in. They've kind of doubled over the material. It's hard to tell from just looking at it here, but if you pull, you're probably not going to be able to see this on camera. if you pull the seam stitching back, the seam tape back a little bit, you can see where it's kind of folded over, and then the tweave is kind of sewn into a, what I'm guessing is the cordura folded over, so that there's like a little pocket there for this to be sewn into. And then the seam tape on top of it. The good news is there's a stitch of sewing on the cordura and the tweave, and then the seam tape on top of it is also stitched in. So again, technically it's double stitched if the tweave actually does go all the way to the end of the little pocket here, then it is actually double stitched in here. So if that's the case, great. No real worries there. However, the problem with it comes simply from comfort. And you wouldn't think that a single layer of folded over cordura and tweave with, 2 layers of seam tape on top of it would be a problem. But it kind of is. I think that may partially be because the way it seems like it's designed to bend over is kind of fucky, for lack of a better word. And that being that it doesn't seem to, even with the plates in here, like I mentioned, even with the Hesco 3810s, it does kind of stretch it to the point where the actual body of the plate bag itself isn't like laying flat against the plate. It's kind of off, pulled to the point where there's tension on it, and therefore it's off the plate a little bit. So instead of being always forced to lay flat, these seams here have a tendency to want to kind of, roll back over. In fact, given, now that the plate bag is opened, you can see that they kind of, they seem to actually want to stick up because that's the way it's sewn. So when you throw this carrier on over your head, these things don't always lay flat on the first try, or you might have one that goes this way and one that goes this way because they're not pressed flat against the plate. This becomes even more of an annoyance when you get to the top, and you'll notice you can see right here the way it's turning to be sewn into the top of the plate bag. So right there you have a design feature that is almost guaranteed to want to consistently pull these ridges straight up so that it's in line with how it's sewn here. Yet at the same time, when the plate is in there and it's laying flat, it wants to turn in and lay flat this way. So you have something that's constantly kind of at war with itself as to which way it wants to lay. And getting it to do that when just throwing it on, especially if you're trying to, hurry the hell up, always leads to something not quite laying right. These things don't always lay flat. Sometimes they get caught in the middle. Then you got to run your hand on the inside of the carrier and try and flatten it up. It's not too bad on the body, although these ridges are absolutely noticeable because there's no padding on the back of this carrier, and the ridges do tend to want to roll in towards the tweave side. So given that the tweave is even thinner than the cordura, all that, especially if you're wearing this with like a t-shirt or a combat shirt type thing, all that is essentially pressing against your torso without any padding or anything on the side of it. So these ridges running down the center of the plate are actually really noticeable once you have that plate strapped tight to your torso and it's pushing into your chest. Especially so up here where it starts to turn, because this curve here, when it gets to the top of the carrier, given if you're running a triple curve plate, the top of the plate also kind of curves up a bit to give it that triple curve. It really does push these ridges into the top of your chest. So from a comfort standpoint, I gotta ding it for that, because it definitely is noticeable, and it is not comfortable because of this thing. So that's probably the biggest problem I would say with this carrier overall, is the comfort level is significantly more annoying than even a basic carrier with just a single layer of cordura on the back. I must admit I was actually pretty bummed about that. I really did think seeing other reviews and stuff for this carrier, I really thought that these would lay flat and that the material was a lot thinner and it wouldn't really be a problem, but it kind of is. Let me see if I can pull this shoulder strap out here real quick so you can see what I was talking about before. Alright, so because this Cordura is kind of like turned over and then sewed in and then pulled through itself to, you know, when the plate carrier is turned right side out, you can actually see, if you pull this back, well, you may not be able to see it, but you can see that first line of stitching in there where it is sewn to the Cordura and the webbing and everything, and then turned around and then sewn again on the outside of the carrier. So technically the straps are double stitched in. So that's okay, I guess, even though I have my own preferences for this, but I think it will be all right. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on the major problem with this carrier being the comfort issue with these center ridges because of the way that this tweed is sewn in here. And given that this is a carrier designed around it being the exact same plate bag for both the front and the back, the comfort issue does exist for the back. In fact, and actually, it's even, if anything, a little bit more annoying on the back because you can't run your hand across the inside of your carrier around the back. So if it turns towards like the top, more towards like your shoulder blades or something like that, this can get really annoying really fast. And the only way you can solve it is essentially to, you know, take the plate carrier on or off, or like jiggle the plate bag up and down your back until it, you know, move it back and forth until something lays flat. And even then, as you can see here, like I said, the upper part of this can never really entirely lay flat. So there's always a little bit of an extra ridge doubling over here at the top of the plate, right where that triple curve part of the plate curves over towards the top of the torso. Super annoying. Alright, so I think that covers the front plate bag. Good enough. Rear plate bag. Same thing as the front, but on the back. The only difference being the shoulder straps are Velcro on the top, loop Velcro, and hook Velcro on the bottom. Again, why it needed to have the loop Velcro on the top of the shoulder straps, I don't really know. I guess it could be somewhat useful for if you were going to put some one wrap around it to, you know, run comm cables or hydration tubes and stuff. It probably could be somewhat useful to help hold that in place, but other than that, a 50-50 on whether or not it's needed to be there. The shoulder straps are sewn the same as the front because these are the same plate bags. All right, so the main thing we'll talk about on the rear is this pullover Molly laser cut panel and the plate carrier itself. So the plate carrier itself, you can't really see it because I'm not going to undo this cover, which was an utter pain in the ass to get on here. But at the top of the carrier is the same Velcro square that the front has on it, attached there, and at the bottom is the exact same single piece of loop Velcro that's, you know, sewn the exact same way and everything. As the carrier comes standard, there is no rear flap to cover over the cummerbund on the back, which is dumb. I hate that feature that people haven't quite gotten over, you know, just doing since the Slickster came out, and this is like one of my pet peeve hills that I will absolutely continue to die on till the end of time, or until manufacturers start updating their carriers to, you know, the current year, considering that having just your cummerbund attached via Velcro and then it just sitting out there, you know, it, not to knock on all these guys, but it's kind of lazy. And it doesn't do anything for either retaining the cummerbund in place if it gets caught on something, or for people that are might say, oh well, it's if you're gonna wear it slick in like a semi-concealed roll, it's gonna help it to slim down the profile on the back. But that has not been what I've found with other carriers that do have flaps in the back. It's one piece of Cordura with one piece of hook Velcro on the bottom of it. That's not thick at all. It's not adding any extra thickness to it. If anything, if anything in a concealable roll, it's actually helping to mute the profile in the back by rounding over the hard edges of the cummerbund attached in the back. So if anything, it's actually helping it to conceal better. It's also helping it to stay on if it gets caught on something. Also, considering these carriers are all geared towards being a sort of slick, semi-scalable kind of design, considering I consistently see people, putting on different cummerbunds and different placards and stuff to scale these things up, if they're going to go more overt with it. The fact that everyone has been doing this for ages, since these carriers became ubiquitous. Everyone does this with the carriers. Everyone wants to scale it, and it's a known fact that people do this. So the fact that you have manufacturers that are still kind of lazing out and not including a very simple one piece of Cordura and Velcro flap to, hold an aftermarket cummerbund in place is, in my opinion, just dumb and a deliberate detraction from the design features that make the plate carrier functional in the way people are looking to use the carrier. So that's my second ding for this carrier, is that, like everybody else, they didn't put an extremely simple back flap on to cover the cummerbund. So unfortunately, if you want a back flap, then you got to go out and spend an extra $68 or 65, whichever it is, to get the slip over plate carrier cover. And I'm going to say this straight up, like, we'll go over it in a later video, but a lot of people like to bitch and moan about, the T-Rex arms carrier costing what it costs, but, at least they included a, back flap sewn on the carrier, with the carrier, instead of you having to then go out and spend 60-something more dollars to get a back panel so that you can have a, flap that actually covers this. Because now that you have this back panel on here, they've got a piece of Velcro here that goes over this, which obviously is, part of holding this back panel on, but it also does now function as it should have originally. So, considering that a simple, piece of Cordura with Velcro wouldn't have cost a considerable amount more time or money or effort to sew on here so that it could function properly with a variety of, cummerbunds so that people can use it as we all know they're going to use it. It would have cost them an extra, what, $5, maybe $10? Oh, God. So it would have been the $105 carrier or the $110 carrier instead of the $99 carrier. I guess that doesn't, stick in people's minds as much, but it would have been finished. A finished, complete, done carrier instead of half-assing the back end like everyone else does. I don't get it. And I didn't want to spend an extra $68 just to have complete functionality when I don't really need the extra MOLLE stuff on the back. Again, your usage may vary. Some people may want the extra MOLLE stuff on the back so they can put a water bladder or something else on the back end of this thing. I kind of feel like zip panels for adding things onto the back of your carrier is still kind of the OP way to do this, and I can theorize a way that you could potentially add a zip panel to carriers without having to go through something like this or have the zippers permanently sewn on, but that's a whole other conversation. Anyways, the point being, if you want MOLLE on the back of this carrier, or if you just simply want a freaking rear flap to cover up the cummerbund so that it, stays on a little bit better, or if you want to be able to scale this carrier up and use an aftermarket Velcro on cummerbund, like something from, defense mechanisms or velocity systems, etc., etc. The fact that you then have to go out of your way to pay $68 more, or 65, whichever it is, 60-something more dollars, just for an extremely simple, basic laser-cut piece of Cordura, or laminate, whatever this is, to put on here is kind of lame. And in my opinion, really kind of defeats the whole purpose of this being like a hyper-budget carrier focused around people on a super low budget. Yeah, there you go. I said it. Kind of lame. Hate me in the comments. I don't care. Anyways, so yeah, this little slip over cover does just slip over the top. We all know how this works. It's got like this little bikini bottom thing going on here with like a little crotchless panties thing going on with this. But anyways, it slips over the top of the plate, folds around the sides. I wish I could say that this fitting over this did something for ameliorating the comfort level with the those inner ridges folding up in here, but it kind of doesn't. It just sort of goes over the top of them, and if you were to run your hands over the carrier, you know, even with a flat like this with no plate, I can still feel a ridge right at the top there, where it veers up to the top because of the way it's sewn. Super annoying, and I don't know why they did that. But anyways, not my problem. I'm just here to gripe at it on the internet. All right. Anyways, yep, it's a basic, laminate back panel laser cut stuff in a, interestingly enough, a 6 wide configuration, which is nice. However, it doesn't quite go all the way to the top of the plate bag. Whether or not that's going to be an issue for an end user, I don't know. Then at the bottom here, it has these little laser cut areas so that when it wraps around your plate here, technically you could potentially attach something at the bottom of this. However, it's going to kind of depend on how thick your plate is, which is going to play into whether or not you actually have a whole inch to use as molly if you want to attach something at the bottom. It also does have a bit of an odd split in the middle, which again, depending on how everything fits together, may or may not cause issues if you were trying to attach one single long item to the bottom here. It just kind of depends on how it's going to fit. But overall, an interesting idea. I'm not sure what I would molly on to the rear plate bag, considering most of the things I could think to attach to a rear plate, like some of those Cry or shit, did Tier make some of those? Those sideways horizontal double magazine hanger that they make for the back that has a magazine pointing off either ends, or something like that Roll 1 medic pouch that's all going to Velcro in anyway, which that's something that I guess I should talk about, in that given the unique design where because of this tweave in the middle, the Velcro attaches vertically in single strips instead of across the bottom. Depending on how long the Velcro is on an item like that, either a mag pouch or some kind of medical pouch, depending on how long that Velcro is, there may be an issue with Velcro purchase if you're attempting to Velcro it into either the front or the rear bag. Something to think about. Anyways, once that's done, this just goes, into the plate bag on top of the flap that's already in there. So basically, you're just having a double layer of Cordura and Velcro in here on the inside of the plate bag. It's not really noticeable, and honestly, it pretty much works as intended. it's an interesting and really clever way to add MOLLE compatibility to the back of a slick plate bag, and it sounds like I'm picking on it, which I'm a little bit, but also I can't knock them. I mean, it's pretty smart design, pretty smart. It's very simple. I don't see the $60 here. I just don't. But it is, for whatever reason. But if you wanted, the option to, along with being able to scale the carrier up, the option to add on things directly to your back panel, it's a pretty simple and clever way to do it. And then, of course, it's also got these one-rep loops on the side. I guess you can use those for maybe some comm routing. It seems like they're a little bit too low down to be useful for hydration tube routing, but I guess they're designed more towards comms. I don't feel like it was really that needed, but hey, why not? So anyways, there you have it. That's pretty much the long and short of the WTF Plate Carrier 13. As far as overall comfort of wearing it goes, let us pause for 1 second while I turn this front bag inside out and then continue blabbing. Because this is why you all came here, right? Watch somebody on the internet turn a plate bag inside out. Maybe I'll edit this out. All right. That's the rear, that's the front. So, as far as overall comfort, I've already talked about the super annoying ridges from this. The other part that some people may or may not find comfortable is the fact that, as you can see, this has very straight straps with no angle to them. As I said before on another review, your body type and overall shoulder fitment with a carrier is going to depend on whether or not you find this comfortable. If you're already wearing something like a Spiritus LV119 and you find the shoulder angle on that comfortable, this will probably be fine with you. If you haven't got an LV119 or any other carrier that has really straight shoulder strap angle and are concerned about whether or not that may work, this may be a nice $99 solution to allow you to try that out and see if that's a comfortable thing for you before you drop like $300 or whatever it is for LV119. Personally, I did not find straight straps to be comfortable. I find that the carriers like the Slickster and Bees and the Smack that we reviewed earlier, when you have a bit of that angle that those carriers have, really makes all the difference in comfort, especially if you're going to wear it for a long period of time. So if I was going to give this carrier 2 knocks, I would say 1, the overall level of sewing is a little bit light, and number 2, actually, I'll give it 3 knocks. Overall sewing a little light. Could have had a back flap. Actually, I'd say should have had a back flap for a whole few dollars more that it would have cost to do that. And the number 3 thing is, the biggest problem. Those are, overlookable things. The biggest problem is the potential comfort issues, both between the ridges here and the straight shoulder strap angle. If the shoulder strap angle is something that you don't find to be a problem for yourself, then this is probably worth giving a try, especially since it's, unless you've got to have the back panel, $99 for a carrier is about as cheap as you can get, and I would say that this is probably sewn about as good as a USA-made piece of gear could be without being any more expensive. I know I've griped about, the sewing being a little bit light, but it is well done. I'm not gonna say I'm not seeing loose threads everywhere. It's nice and tight, so it's not shit. I mean, and I gotta admit, some of the things they did, like, just making two of the same exact, front and rear bag and just join them together. I mean, smart ways to cut some corners and save some design time and money and, manufacturing effort. And then, as usual, like a lot of these carriers seem to be, then they couple it with a couple things that are just a little bit derpy and makes you wonder what exactly they were thinking when they designed it. So there you have it. If you think this might work for you, it's well worth a try, especially at the price point. Thanks for watching, and I hope you guys got something out of this.